This episode of the Nerdball Podcast is sponsored by Jake Paluski at Real JP Multimedia. He does the music for this podcast. He has produced this podcast. If you need anything audio-visual done, he is the man to see at realjp.com, REELJP.com. Let's start the show.
This is Anthony Martinez, and this is the Nerdball Podcast.
This is the Nerdball Podcast with Lorenzo Melcher.
All right, Anthony, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was on yours, and where we talked about paranormal slacktivities. Is it considered a horror podcast, or what do you consider?
Yeah, that? I guess like a horror movie review podcast.
Okay, right.
I guess that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah. So I got to be on your podcast, which is really fun. My podcast, I don't do homework, so I had to do some homework on that one. But it's fun because I got to watch a movie, so that's always fun.
Yeah. That's the only thing I don't like about it is I have to actually put in some effort before the podcast. I have to go through the whole plot and everything, make sure I got all the talking points I want.
Yeah, and we'll talk all about that. But before we get into everything, the question I always ask everyone is, what's something you've been nerding out about, something you're really into, a hobby, if it's a hobby you've been doing for forever, if it's a hobby you just started, what's something that's got your attention now? And like I say everybody, it can't be your job, something to get you away from that.
Yeah, so the podcast is one of the things right now, and then also like Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing that. Well, it's called Dungeon World, which is pretty much like a very condensed version of Dungeons and Dragons, where there's not as many rules and like character sheets are a lot easier to maintain and everything. But that's one of the things that I've been really into lately.
So I'm fascinated with Dungeons and Dragons. It seems like something I would really enjoy. It also seems like something you really have to devote a lot of time to.
It's like yes and no.
Okay.
It's very fun. I enjoy it. I wish I got into it when I was like a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So now trying to set up a session with like the 5 other people I play with is like setting up spreadsheets. Like, what days are you off this next month? And then it's like, all right, everybody, this works this day, so that we could set it up. But like in high school, it would have been like, hey, I'm coming over this Friday and almost every Friday after that. So.
That's a good point. Scheduling. Well, scheduling podcasts. It's hard to do because not only are you trying to match up your schedules, but life stuff happens, and you have a kid. So it's tough. Well, I just texted, we were supposed to do this yesterday, and I texted you like, hey, I can't do it today. We got to move it around, and luckily, thanks for being flexible on that. So what is it about? Yours is called, what was it called? Dungeon World.
Dungeon World.
What is it about Dungeon World or that genre in general that draws you to that? What do you like about it?
It's like you could just kind of do whatever. Mm-hmm. Like there's no restriction basically. Once you kind of set up the world and everything, you can pretty much do anything you want. And it's cool to be able to just like create a world, because I'm the dungeon master. Okay. So I set up the play for everybody. And then it's really fun to put in all this effort and like setting up a story and then seeing where these people take it. Because a lot of the times they'll do other things besides what you want them to do.
Yeah.
So then you have to like think on the fly and everything. But it's very, very fun because it's so open, and it's not only like there's no limitation. So I could think of like 100 things to do in this one particular thing, and then I have 6 other people who are also thinking of all these other things they could do in this situation. So it's fun to be able to bounce off ideas off of each other and like play out these scenarios in ways you probably wouldn't have thought of in the first place.
I guess that's why the open world concept of video games is so like popular, because I mean there are some people like, yes, give me the video games, I go from left to right, I do these things, I get points or kill bad guys, I like those. But I mean they're becoming a lot of popular because people, like you said, they like to make their own decisions. Okay, I want to do this thing, but I want to do this other thing first, and I have the ability to do all that.
Yeah. Like a lot of the fun things about open world and like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff is like you can choose, like in a lot of these open world games, you could pick like 18 different weapons to use.
Yeah.
In some games are just like, here's your one weapon, and you could sometimes get it upgraded, but it's going to do the same thing this whole game.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't get a weapon, you just get to jump on people and squish them.
Yeah, sometimes you can shoot fireballs and stuff, but
yeah. Why is it you got into it now as opposed to when you were a kid? What made it appealing now?
Podcast, really. Like,
oh, okay.
Before I knew of it, but I never thought to play it. Like it sounded like too much for me. And okay. It's like, and also when you're like a teenager, you're like, oh, that's like the nerd stuff. Like that's like, you want to avoid like doing something that might like make you appear to be worse than you are. So it was a lot of like, I just didn't know about it. And then I started listening to different podcasts. Like The Adventure Zone was the one that really got me into it.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever listened to My Brother and Me.
No, I've heard of that, but I have not listened to it.
So yeah, they did like for their podcast, they had like something like a Patreon kind of thing. One of their bonus episodes they just did like a D&D session with their dad.
Oh.
And then they're like, actually, let's just make this its own podcast. And so then so I listened to the regular show first, and then when they came out The Adventure Zone, I started listening to that, and I'm like, man, this seems like extremely fun to do. And so then that's kind of what got me into playing it, is just different podcasts.
Well, that podcasts are awesome for that. Not just like, hey, this cool thing is out there, this cool game, but even a genre of podcast. I love listening to audio dramas. Those are my favorite. And I talked about on the last episode, audio dramas are my favorite, and I want to write one at some point. But just, I didn't know that existed until, I listened to it. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I'm like, wait, this is just old timey radio just now, So so it's existed for a long time. It's just better because technology is better. But I always tell people when they're looking to get into podcasts, now not so much because mostly everyone knows what a podcast is. But before, I would show them the podcatcher that I got and say, all you do is download this thing, go to the search bar, type in anything. What interests you? Do flowers interest you? Type in flowers. There's 1,000 podcasts about it. Find one that you like, and that's the cool thing. Like you can just pile on what you already love about X topic.
Yeah. It's insane how many different podcasts there are about every single topic.
Yeah.
Have you listened to We're Alive or We're Alive?
Yes, that's my favorite. That was my favorite, and it's coming back, man.
I know there's like, I think they put out one episode or like 2 episodes, but it's like a part 1 and part 2. But yeah, that one I listened to, I randomly found it, and then I was like, man, I finished it, and then nothing since then. But they just came out with the new part, and I was like, this is great. But dude, that's one of my favorite ones that I've listened to so far.
Oh, like I said, that is my favorite all-time audio drama. It's so well done. And I don't know if it's just because it's audio or because I don't do this with television shows. Usually if a television show, the season's over, I'm like, man, when is that coming back? When is it coming back? With podcasts, I listen to so many, the season can be over. And then 3 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, this existed and it's awesome. It's so well done. The audio is so good. And I can see why they take so much time off, because it's because they need to. That's how good it is. So if anybody's out there and you love audio dramas, We're Alive. I think it has like 4 or 5 seasons, maybe some more, but it is
it's pretty long.
It's really good though. Without seeing it, that's how I know it's good, because I can picture people in my head. When someone talks, like I know exactly what this person looks like, and as much as I sometimes don't like when things get turned into TV shows, this would be such an awesome TV show or movie,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it would be cool if they just did like an animated series for it.
Yeah,
it's like they already have the voice. Like they don't
Mhm.
have to like do another voice. They could just make a cartoon or whatever of this. But yeah, that one's really good, and like how descriptive they are, and just like like you said, I pictured like every single little scene in my
Yes.
head because of how good it was.
Yeah. Another one I like is they've done a couple where it's like a 4-episode story arc, but it's The Truth, where every I think it's every other week, but it's just a one-off story, but it's all audio drama, it's all made up. But that's a good one too, because some of them are freaky, some of them are scary, some of them are just funny and weird, but it's always different things every week, which I like, that the variety of it.
Yeah, and I haven't heard that one, and I really didn't get into a lot of them. I usually only find them if like a podcast I was listening to was like, hey, this is one.
Yeah.
The another one I listened to was Bubble.
Oh, I never heard that one.
That one, it's kind of like futuristic, and it's like in a world where like these people are actually living in a bubble. It's more like more of like a funny podcast than anything, but it's just pretty funny. There's like how there's like Uber Eats and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's an app for like these monsters that are coming in. Like these monsters will come in, and you use these apps to get like a hunter there to take out the monster. And it's just like after people will come out there and they'll like rescue somebody, and they're like, make sure you leave 5 stars, and just it's just goofy, but that one's pretty good.
That's another one I really like. It's called Mission to Zix.
Yeah.
That's a same thing. It's like a funny thing. And some of my favorite parts on those is at the end of the credits, they do a outtake scene when they're going through stuff, and the voices haven't been changed yet, so you can hear the person who's supposed to sound like a little creature or something just sound regular, but they're talking through it. That one's actually, I think this is the last season of that one, they said, but that's a good one too. That we can go on and on. I listen to podcasts all the time.
Yeah, me too.
It's so fun. So speaking of podcasts, you, like we said at the beginning, you have your own Paranormal Slacktivites. How many episodes are out now? Like, you got like 6?
I just posted the 6th one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good podcast, especially if you like horror movies. And I like that you don't just say, hey, come on the podcast, we're going to talk about this movie. You say, you want to come on the podcast, pick a movie, and that's what we'll talk about.
Yeah, because I never really liked scary movies. I've always liked horror movies. I always liked the stories, but like just the anxiety that I get when I'm watching, just waiting for like different pop-ups and stuff is very, I'm not a fan of that. But I always liked the story. Like, what did they use to come up with this? So that's the main reason I wanted to do it, because I wanted to force myself to watch more scary movies.
Okay.
And I also have the guest pick because like I want to know what they enjoy.
Yeah. Also, go ahead. I said it makes them more invested in it too,
Yeah. And because if it was me picking the movies, I would probably pick like the most mainstream movies, and then like with other people picking it, they kind of give me stuff that I like never even heard of. Like you did Train to Busan. I never even knew that existed, really.
Yeah. That's it's a cool concept. It's I like, basically, if you don't know the movie and you don't like watching horror movies, you can listen to this podcast, because I wasn't sure what to expect, and it was awesome because you just go through the whole movie and we talk about certain parts and interject. I interject or you interject when we have to, and even though I ruined the end with the quiz, it was really cool. And then I guess the end part isn't just like, all right, that's the movie. There's a couple things at the end of the episode where it gets, listeners and more involved, as opposed to just listening. They can answer questions to themselves.
Yeah. Well, I kind of mess it up for myself sometimes. A couple of the episodes I've recorded, I've like given away one of the things before we even got to that part. Because I mean, as I'm like filling out the questions and stuff, I'm doing research into it. So I'm like, oh, this is a fun little anecdote of this. And then as I'm going through the story with them, I'll like say one of the answers on accident because of I just wanted to get this information out. It's
Yeah.
But yeah, that's very fun, but not doing the work is not very fun.
How long did you have this idea before you started doing it? Because I know for me, I've wanted to do a podcast for a long time. I actually did one for a few episodes with my wife several years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and then ended it after 6 or 7 episodes. And but I would imagine like, hey, I want to do this thing, and then you just every month you're like, I want to do this thing, and then just that's how I imagine people who want to do podcasts.
Yeah, it's been kind of like a year in the making.
Okay.
Like I thought of the name of it as just a joke. Like a lot of the times I think of like puns, like that's like my big thing.
Yeah.
So I thought of Paranormal Slacktivities as like just a stupid joke where it's like a podcast where instead of doing my chores, I will watch scary movies instead. So I said that as a joke, and then I was talking to a friend about it, and we were like gonna set it up, and it was gonna be us two and somebody, and then guest. But then just being an adult, you can't always work out the schedules. So then after a while, I'm just like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it on my own instead of waiting for us to be able to do it together. So
that's what I was going to ask too, if there was a point where there was going to be another host with you, because I know that's the only reason this started is because there was another friend of mine that wanted to do it with me, and it made it a lot easier because it was on both of us to say, hey, we have to prepare, otherwise it's not going to be good. And doing it by yourself is a little more nerve-wracking. I know it was when I kind of just said, okay, well, I'm just going to start talking to people. It takes a while to figure out how you interview people or just having conversations, finding a rhythm. It's all new people, and it can be scary because you don't have that other person to lean on that also loves this as much as you do.
Yeah, and that's like I'm kind of like on the fence about it. Like I do want another co-host, but then it's another person I have to schedule with, and then since it's just me and you today, we were able to like reschedule really quickly.
Yeah.
Just you don't have to like, okay, we can't do it today, but we're all going to be available in 3 weeks from now. Just so being alone, it's a little better on that front.
Mm-hmm.
But I have noticed sometimes in some of the episodes where I'm like, I'll say something to like try to get the guest to talk about it, and then they like will just give like a one-word answer, and then there's just like some silence there. Like another person would have been good to have, but I'm also very like I want the podcast to be a certain way, and sometimes when you have other people who are it's also their thing as well, you can't just say no, your opinion doesn't matter.
No, I totally understand that. That's the one thing that this podcast has helped me is how to interview people, how to not only how to ask questions, but how to listen. And I was just talking to somebody today, like I'm good at listening and also trying to think of a question. Also, I'm pretty good at BSing my way if I don't know a question. So let's say me and you are talking, you answer the question that I asked you, and I don't have another one prepared. I'm pretty good at just basically either restating something that was already said and then asking a new question at the end, but just filling that silence. And it's hard to do, and especially when you have a guest. And I've interviewed high school kids where they're not good at conversing, and it's like just like you said, one word answers, or they're turning away from the mic and you can't hear them very well, or so it's a challenge, but it's good. It's you learn from it, and then you try to figure more out. Plus, I think part of it too, and we'll get into this. I think being that we both did stand-up comedy kind of helps. I know it helps me kind of be okay with silences, because that's another thing too. People aren't okay, and when you're on stage and you tell a joke and people laugh, it took me a while to figure out, like, hey, let them finish their laugh. It can be silent for about 2 or 3 seconds and then go on, so I think part of that plays into this too.
Yeah, and the issue I have is, like, even though I did stand up, I'm very, like, socially awkward.
Yeah.
And, like, I have, like, when I write down, like, the kind of the outline of the podcast, because I have to write a lot of it out because I am going through the whole plot, so I don't make sure I don't miss things. So then I know what my next sentence is going to be. So then when my guest will, like, say something, and then instead of me, like, really paying attention to it, I'm, like, so focused on what I'm going to say next that, like, I just don't interact with what they just said. And I'm like, oh, I should have, like, as I'm listening to the episode while I'm editing it, I'm like, I should have talked, like, that's something I should have talked about, or I shouldn't have just said, like, yeah, and then just went on with my thing.
That's something I learned by listening to other people too. Bill Simmons, he's a sports writer. He has a Bill Simmons podcast, and he said, and I did it a few times where I have questions. But you're right. If you have questions, you're just waiting to get to the next question. And then he also stopped writing things down when he would interview people. Like, if sometimes this person goes on a long answer and there's other things you want to get to, and he would start writing down, but then he, like you said, he wouldn't listen. So I don't write anything anymore. I don't have questions prepared. I just go with the flow. Sometimes afterward, the same thing, like, oh, this would have been a good question to ask. Or the person's talking and I think, okay, I'm going to ask this next. And then they keep talking and I forget what I was going to say. But then I end up with another question. But it's more of a conversation that way, as opposed to me just interviewing someone. And that's what I'm trying to get this podcast to. Let's just have a conversation. Let's just talk, and it's very difficult. But your podcast, it's very difficult to do that because you have to have stuff written down. You have to have this information, because that's the point of the podcast, is to give movie information along with having a conversation. So I think as you do more, you'll be able to not just be like, acknowledge they said something and then go on. You'll be able to do more. Now it's going to make your podcast longer because you're still going to want to hit all your points. But it's going to make it better. And it's just practice, like anything else.
Yeah, I've already noticed that I am, like when I listened to the first episode I recorded compared to the last one I recorded, like, I could tell, like, okay, I'm getting better. I have, like, a better understanding of how I want to run the thing, and it's sounds a little less scripted and everything. So I am ready. I'm excited for, like, 5-6 months down the line where what it's gonna be.
And I know I got in a thing at the beginning, like, man, I want more people to listen. Why aren't people listening? And I had to keep I told my friend, because we were both kind of like that when it was me and him doing this podcast. And I was like, hey, man, I feel that way all the time. But if we just keep doing it because we love to do it, and we just tell ourselves that because it's fun and we like talking to each other and doing this podcast, then if no one listens, we're still having fun and having a good time. I mean, ultimately, I would like to, I would love if this turned into a job, but ultimately it's a hobby and I still have fun. And, I get to talk to friends I've made, I there's no way we would have been friends any other way besides through comedy. I don't think I ever would have met you, and to do things like this and just continue talking to people, meeting people, and it's enjoyable. And hopefully, eventually it'll be enjoyable to a lot more people. But for now, I love when someone texts me, say, hey, that was a good episode, or I like that person, or if I miss a day, hey, what happened? Why isn't it out? And so people are engaged and it's fun.
Yeah, that's another issue I'm having right now, is just, like, watching the numbers, which
or the
like,
number.
Yeah, the number. Like, the first 2 episodes that came out, I think, kind of with a lot of things, like, everybody wants to check it out. So then, like, those 2 were, like, bigger episodes, and then I'm like, oh, cool, if we just continue this, like, I'll be pretty happy with this number. And then, like, the third one comes out and, like, that number drops, and then, like, the next one comes out and it drops again. I'm like, where'd everybody go? What happened? But I just gotta keep going.
And like you said, you're having fun doing it. It's when you're not having fun and you're not getting listeners, you're like, okay, why am I doing this then? Or what do I need to change? Something here. the good thing I like about your podcast too is as far as being a podcast producer is it's not timely. So you can decide like, hey, this weekend, my wife and kids are out of town. I wonder if I can record 6 episodes and then just that's what I like about it. With me, I try to get it out every Monday and Thursday, and sometimes I record. I've had only twice where I put like I recorded for future dates, but a lot of times we talk about timely things, and I can't record something and then 6 weeks later put it out. It's tough,
Yeah.
But and I don't know if you have that ability too, but I always think about that. Like, man, if I had this certain kind of podcast, I could try to bang a bunch out in one day.
Yeah, that's how I was at the beginning, because I wanted like a month's worth extra. So then because I know I won't be able to always record like one episode a week, which is kind of like my goal, is to at least get one episode recorded a week. But I mean, having a wife and 2 kids and a full-time job, it's like, it's not always going to happen. So I did like 5 or 6. I think I recorded 5 episodes in like 2 weeks.
Okay.
So then now I can kind of just like do once a week, once every other week, and still be ahead of time without worrying about really missing a week, as long as I actually put in the effort to edit the podcast and everything.
Sure. What site do you use to host your podcast, or how do you get your podcast out there?
Anchor.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure because people use all kinds of different stuff. And I use Podbean. That's what Nate Armbruster first used when he did his podcast. And because I'm unfamiliar with how any other pod host website their numbers are. I just know Podbean. So I was just curious. How have you found using Anchor?
I like it. It immediately posts to it's like it automatically goes to Spotify because it's like partnered with Spotify.
Yeah.
And then all I really had to do was like set up a couple different other websites, but I just had to like send it the RSS feed and kind of did it all on its own. But it kind of keeps all of the information all in one spot. So I don't have to like check 4 or 5 different sites or anything like that.
Yeah.
But
do you I think I mean Podbean's like that too. So that's why I like it. Like it's a simple thing, and you post there and it posts everywhere else. Some are later than others, but it's good. Do you enjoy editing?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I like being able to because a lot of the times, sometimes I'll say like all the time. So I like being able to just like, okay, let me just cut this out and make me sound a little better than than I am.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it's like, all right, I have to listen to this hour-long episode. So sometimes I just don't want to do it because I'm rather be doing something else. But it's not too bad.
I made it easier for myself. I don't edit anything. I put music and an ad in front and music in my closing remarks in the back, and don't even worry about all the other stuff, because I got pretty good at not saying ands and ums and likes and all that stuff. And if the other person does, whatever, I did one episode when it was real early on. It was me and my friend where I took out all those, and it took forever. And I'm like, I'm not doing this. I got other things to do. But I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy like finding new things. Like last episode, the guy I interviewed, Todd Stanton, he had pictures of things that he talked about, and during the episode he's like, and here's a picture of this thing. And so I did something new where I never like put in pictures in the video, so it was just a new way to edit that I've never done before. So I like doing all that stuff, and it's fun, and it's something I think if I get more time, like I would like to make it better. But for now it is what it is, and it's still I mean it's still pretty cool. But sometimes I got pretty efficient with it too. Like I can do the audio in about 5 minutes, and I can do the video in about 10. So it's pretty quick because I don't do any of that other stuff.
Yeah.
Which makes podcasting more fun because you don't, I don't want to sit through my own. I've never listened to one of my episodes, and I don't want to sit through it and edit it out either.
I don't know what it is, but I've listened. Not only do I edit it, and then once it comes out, I listen to it again.
Yeah.
Just because I think 2 or 3
for the download.
Times, yeah, for the download. But it's mostly because like there's like 2 or 3 episodes so far that I posted where like the one I didn't edit the background music, so it was just way too loud. And then another one, I just completely put out the unedited version of it.
I remember that one because I think you made a post on Facebook about it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm so dumb. So I listened to it, so at least I could catch those things and get that fixed before anybody else tells me about it.
So you have kids, you're married, you're podcasting now, and a full-time job. It sounds just like me, and there's a reason I quit comedy is because there was just no time. Is that kind of what happened to you too?
Well, yeah, it was mostly because I was going to school at the time.
Yeah, I remember that too. Yeah.
So while I'm going to school, and I was going to school like at night, so I could like watch the kids, or I had a job at the time. So I was going to school and had a job and had 2 kids. So it was like, all right, I can't really do comedy, or if I did, it was like once every month.
Yeah.
And it felt like doing comedy for the first time. Every time I went on stage, it was like torture half the time. So I was like, yeah, as much as I enjoy it, I know I'm not going to do anything with it. Like I'm not going to pursue it. And it just kind of it wasn't as fun as it was at the beginning when I was like doing it all the time.
I mean, same with me. Like I loved it. It was so much fun. It was just this thing that I love to do. And I mean, I love to do it so much. I'd go to the show you ran at Suck It Hookah. And I'd get home at, I don't know, 11:30 and have to wake up at 5 to go to work, all those late nights. It was fun though. And it was fun at being, when I started being the new person in the scene, but it was such a cool thing because whenever I went to open mic, I mean, I think you told me, you're like, hey, I got an open mic. If you want to come, you can come on my open mic, and it was it's so welcoming, and I didn't know what to expect. I didn't think it was going to be like, hey, get the hell out of here. But, it was so welcoming, and that made it even more fun. Like, I want to be a part of this and be on the show and create shows for other people. And it was a good time.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite things, not only because it was like my thing, but I always felt like even if we didn't have a huge crowd, most of the people there were really into it. And all of the comics that came were always super chill and usually would listen as well. Sometimes you go to a show and like all the comics are just like in another area, just not even paying attention to the show. And so the crowd's not always great, but I pretty much always enjoyed the Suck It Hookah nights.
That's what the cigar bar. I don't know if you ever went there in Waterville. That was a fun show, but the comics were in another room. So it was whoever was there, and a lot of those open mics you depend on the comics to be in the crowd too. They're half or 75% of the crowd. So but it was cool, and it was a bummer when you stopped. I always felt like we always had something in common because we're both Hispanic, but we never made a point to be like, hey, this is what we have in common, like 2 little idiots, but those are the jokes that you had that really resonated with me. Like I get it, it's cool. It's something, I like it because it's something not a lot of people understood. I don't think there was around Toledo there, not that I can't remember any more Hispanic comedians that were out in our around the area. So it was a cool, like, not a niche thing, but it was cool to like see someone else who also understands what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I don't think there was that many either.
But yeah, it was cool, man. And actually, obviously, I'm glad I was part of that and met you and met a bunch of other people, and to see all these other people. Like, I went to Mike Czar's album recording he had in Michigan. Me and my wife went, and that was cool. Keith, when he had his and Mommy, seeing these cool things happen. And unfortunately, it never seems to stick. Nothing seems to stick. All these cool shows or pandemics knocked them out. The rooftop that Keith ran was awesome. He did the show at the Clada that I was a part of one time, where I got my first paid gig. All that stuff is it's like cool to say I did it.
That was at the mall, right? The Clada.
Yes, yeah. The restaurant doesn't exist anymore, but yeah, it was there.
Yeah. So the host, so they did like were you talking about the like the contest they would do there?
No, this was a show. Like,
just
it
a
was
regular show.
Yeah, it was a host, feature, and then headliner.
Yeah, they did a couple like contests there, and the person who hosted it, she wasn't really a comic, and I did like the most douchebag thing I ever did because I was the first comic up, and the host didn't like warm up the crowd or anything. So like there's absolutely no way that I win because now I have to warm up the crowd. And I was like just upset afterwards. And
Yeah.
I felt horrible afterwards, but like after the show, I was like, yeah, maybe you should have an actual comic host the show.
Yeah.
And she wasn't very happy about that. But I was
That's a good point though.
yeah, yeah. I was very upset because I had to like I did well, but like the first couple of minutes was like the crowd wasn't ready for comedy yet.
Yeah.
And I felt I was a little butthurt about it.
Do you have a joke now that you think about you used to do that was one of your favorite jokes?
I think my Titanic joke is the one that was like I wrote that one very early on, and like I felt like out of all the jokes that I wrote, that one like stood up the longest.
Okay.
Like I'm sure you had jokes when you first started that like you would never tell because it
Sure.
just
Yeah.
wasn't good, or it wasn't really even a joke. You just thought it was a joke when you were writing it initially. So that one was like the one that I was like, okay, I wrote this pretty early on and I feel good about it every time I tell it. Even like I think I was like 8 years in when I stopped.
Yeah.
But it just always felt good. That was
You did it for
probably the
8
one
years?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, about 8 years.
Wow, that's did you besides the hookah show, did you have any other shows that you ran? I don't
No,
remember.
that was the only one that I ran. Yeah, it was originally at a different place. I don't know if you were ever at the original Suck It Hookah place. It was on
No.
Door Street by
No.
by UT.
Okay.
Yeah, so it started off there, and I didn't host it then. Steve hosted it. If you remember Steve.
Yeah.
Steve Weary.
Yes.
So he hosted it initially, and then he kind of didn't want to host it anymore. So then I took over, and it was like a monthly thing at first. And then they moved to the new location. And then that's when I set it up with initially Travis Rice, where we kind of did like a 2-person host thing. And then Mike Czar started doing it with me after Travis left.
Now for people who are listening, they are probably mad if I don't ask what the Titanic joke was. Okay. You don't have to say it if you don't want to, but
no, I'm okay with saying it.
Okay.
You don't like cussing on this show, right?
No, go ahead. That's
okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty much like I would say like ladies, I just need some participation here. It's like clap if you hate people who cheat on people, and then like most of them would clap.
Yeah.
And then it's like then clap if you liked the movie Titanic, and then they would like start to clap and then like realize like that part, like the whole plot was so then I was like, yeah, the whole plot to Titanic was Rose cheating on her fiance. And then but a lot of people will say like, yeah, that's because her fiance tried to kill Jack. And I say, yeah, that's because Jack fucked his girlfriend in a car on a boat. Like there's no way to top that unless you were to have sex with somebody in a car, in an airplane, on a bigger boat. So that was the whole joke.
Oh man. That brings back memories, man. That's fun. I do remember when I did a show that you were on with Keith and Reese out where was it? I can't. It was a Valentine's show at a hall. I can't remember. And you went first. I was the host.
Oh yeah, I think I remember that one.
Yeah, you went first, or I did some stuff, did some jokes, and then that I was not prepared. That's when I learned like, hey, I should probably not use brand new jokes on shows like this.
Yeah.
And then you went, and because I fucked up so bad, they were just not into it. And then I remember going back on. I go, well, by the sound of this crowd, you'd be lucky to know that that the rest of the comedians are white.
Yeah.
And I mean, I laughed really hard at myself.
Yeah.
But I do remember that. And that's when that's like I said, that's when I realized like, hey, I gotta like practice these. I can't just pretend that I know what I'm doing.
I would like to make you to blame for that. So, but I just don't think they liked the fact. Like I don't know. It felt like it was a pretty older crowd, not like
Yeah.
super old, but they definitely were not into whatever this 25-year-old dude was talking about.
Well, I'll take the blame because I was trying material I've never tried before, and I wrote that day. So, and you talked about having a full-time job. I'm assuming that's something that's what you went to school for, to have the job you have now.
Yeah. I went for, it's called wide area networking, which is pretty much just like making sure a company's internet works and like their computers can talk to each other. So right now I'm working in the cybersecurity.
Is that something you do from home?
No,
You go somewhere and do it?
unfortunately, no. I have to I have to go to the plant, the GM
okay.
plant.
Oh,
So,
nice. How do you
yeah,
like it?
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It sounds way bigger than like I actually like what I normally do, is because I kind of we just find out, oh hey, this program is not okay to have on computers, so make sure you uninstall it on every computer in the plant. Like, okay, then that's what we do. Or it's like, hey, this is the program we're using to monitor things. Make sure every computer has it. All right. It's pretty simple, but it sounds like cybersecurity sounds like I'm like stopping hackers from getting in on a daily basis. No, just making sure we do or don't have a program on a computer.
Making sure the employees don't mess up something.
Yeah,
I would imagine there's a lot bigger risk there than hackers trying to hack in.
I mean, there are people who try to hack in, but that's like the people who deal with that are like way above what I'm doing.
Oh, okay. How long have you been at that job?
A couple months.
It's a new thing.
This one. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Are you a, because I know there's um contractors. Are you a contractor or are you part of GM employee?
Yeah, contractor.
Oh, okay. All right. Because that'd have been pretty sweet too.
Yeah.
I'd imagine GM's not interested in the cybersecurity business.
I mean, they do have like employees that are specifically GM that are in that, but it's kind of like this is like a beginning position where they're like, okay, we can get contractors for this part, and then if we like them and they're doing the job, and then we can bring them on board.
Nice. I want to go back to comedy because I just thought of a question. Will you ever tell your kids or show your kids that you did stand-up comedy?
Probably not. It's not. It'll probably come up at one point in time, but I'm not like going to be actively like keeping it.
Listen
from
to
them,
me.
But
Listen.
Yeah. I'm not going to be like back in my day, I used to do stand-up comedy.
You know who gets more excited than anybody that I tell them I used to do comedy is adults that know me. They're like, really? We can't picture you doing that. Or, I mean, it's a mixture. It's always a mixture of, oh yeah, I could totally see you doing that. It's, but yeah, they love my kids are aware because, well, my son, because he was older and I used to tell him like, hey, I'm going to do a comedy show. And so they're aware of it. But I have one video on YouTube that I used to submit to some festivals and stuff. So I had to put a link on there. And I had some football players that I coached found it. And I was like terrified that they were going to see me as someone who plays Dungeons and Dragons, like you said at the beginning. But they're like, it was pretty good. I liked it. I said, okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you were to look for me on YouTube, you could find videos that I'm like not happy exist, because it was like really early on and just like jokes that I'm like, okay, I don't want these to be out there anymore because they weren't good at the time, but they were the best thing I had. But I don't own any of the videos, so I can't like take them down.
Where are they from?
Just like random people. Like there was this one show at our brother's place downtown. I don't know if you ever did that one.
No.
But the host would always like record people's sets and put it up there.
Oh, okay.
And then I think there's just another one of just some random person who was at Suck It Hookah who like recorded it. it put it online. So it's just like those exist. I don't. I'm not a fan of them, but they do exist.
Yeah, I there was a show in maybe it was the Funny Stop. That's what that it was that guy would put everything on TV or YouTube or whatever, which seems weird to me. That because it's basically an open mic.
Yeah.
And that you're just gonna put all this stuff on there. I don't know. It always just seemed weird to me. So now you're just live. I don't want to. I felt so bad. I was gonna say boring life, but it's not boring.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why I was gonna say that. But
No,
now it's like a regular life, right? You're fulfilled with what you're doing, and but it's a far cry from being 25-year-old Anthony, telling jokes. How do you traveling places? How do you feel like when you think about like, man, I used to do all that stuff. How do you feel about it now?
I mean, I enjoyed it at the time. Definitely now, I don't think I would enjoy it as much, just because at that point where I was like stopping comedy, that's where I like, okay, I can't just keep just doing open mics.
Yeah.
And I would have had to like start trying to like get workplaces, and at least from what other comics said, it's not always fun trying to like get into clubs and things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty happy with where I stopped. I enjoyed it, but I definitely didn't feel like it was something I could really pursue.
I feel the same way too. Like I'm really glad I did it. It was a thing that when I started, I had no idea what to expect. I don't know if I was gonna be funny, and I wasn't at the beginning. But I got better, and to see. I mean, I just found a bunch of old videos on I was cleaning files on my computer, cleaning up files, and like from my first ever set at the Funny Bone in Perrysburg, like, oh my God, I'm talking about my wife being pregnant, and I'm like, man, it was 8 years ago that this was, and
Yeah.
just to like hear those horrible shitty jokes, but it also made me think like, man, I went a long way enough to I got paid a few times, and it was cool, and it was an awesome thing. I'm glad I did, and which I'm sure you've, like you said, you feel the same way. Like it's a cool part of my life, and something I still credit to not only this, but also helping me be a good coach. I coach anywhere from, or I have coached anywhere from 5 and 6-year-olds to 18-year-olds. So all that it helped me some way, be a better speaker. And I can use that going forward.
Yeah, I feel the same. Like talking in front of people is not like what it used to be now. It's not as big of a deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. I think at like towards the end, when I knew I wasn't going to really pursue it, I felt like writing jokes, like there was no point to it, because it's like, why am I going to get this? Yeah, I kind of had like a grim look towards the end, where I was like, okay, why am I going to spend time writing a joke when it's not like it's not going to go anywhere? I'm just going to do it at an open mic. But my favorite part about comedy was always watching someone else like get good at a joke, where like you hear like the first iteration of a joke, and then like 2 or 3 months down the line they say it again, and you're like, this joke is like 100 times better than when they first started it.
Yes, I totally agree. And when I first started doing it, I was like, why? I see this person everywhere, and they keep doing the same joke. And then after, like you said, after a few months, you're like, oh, this is why they do the same joke over and over. It's because it's got so much better. And that was like, I felt good for that person. And sometimes I'd be like, dude, I heard this joke 2 months ago, and now you added like 3 words, and it's 1,000 times better. But it's always finding those little things to add or subtract.
Yeah, and I was very lucky, like hosting with Mike, because like he was one of my favorite people to watch like get good at a joke, because he was always very funny, but I always got to watch him specifically tell a joke every week.
Yeah.
And I got to see him more often than anybody else, like get a joke better, and it was always fun to watch him.
that's what was cool about his album release is he did some jokes from when I first met him, and I was like, man, I'm so glad it made me feel like warm inside, like, oh man, I'm so glad these jokes are in there. Although there is one joke that I love that he did, and he only did it one time that I saw. He might have done it a few more times, but it was something to the effect of why are certain things attributed to certain races, and why fried chicken always associated with black people? Why can't it be other things like black people love helicopters, and then when black people around you just go, it's getting pretty windy in here, if you know what I mean. I love that joke, and I always, whenever I saw him, like, dude, can you do that joke tonight? And he was just like, nah, he just never did. I loved it so much. One of my friends who was in town, he lives in California, and he saw him do it the same night I did. He felt the same way, like, dude, that is such a good joke.
I especially love really dumb jokes.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite jokes that I think about all the time is from Kyle Kinane. And he's like, mayonnaise doesn't go bad. It just becomes Miracle Whip. And that's the miracle. And it just such a stupid joke that doesn't mean anything, but I think about it all the time because of how ridiculously dumb it is.
That is good. One thing I'm going to start doing now, and you're going to be the guinea pig for this. You're going to be the pilot program. So normally this podcast went exactly like it just went. You talk about your hobbies. You talk about just chit chatting. Sometimes we talk about work. We probably talked about your job for 3 minutes, But so I always what I want to do now. It's something I've been into just recently. So my job at the Metro Parks, I'm in charge of Pearson Metro Park and Howard Marsh, and that's my job. I run the park on a day-to-day basis. Something I've been getting into more is staff development. I've been working with our staff development manager about trying to do more in that space. And I asked her a question about, are we concerned with people being happy at their job? Are we concerned with are people doing what they love? And I listened to this podcast called The Learning Leader Show. And they talked about loving, like, not necessarily loving their job, but is there a part of the job that you love? Because that will bring someone back every day. Like, I love this part. I'm coming back. There's bad days and good days, but this part I always love. So that's what I'm gonna start doing at the end, because we normally don't talk about people's jobs. But for you, and you being the first one, what can you tell me about your job that when you wake up, you're like, I'm glad I have this job, or I love this part of my job, even if it's something real little, like I like using this program, or I like talking to this person when there's an issue. Like what is something that you love about your job?
So I haven't been able to do it a lot with this one yet. I know it's going to be bigger, but I just don't know the stuff we work with enough yet, because I'm still kind of in training. Yeah. So, but when I was working at my previous job, my whole job was like troubleshooting stuff, like making sure getting stuff to work, which is what I will be doing at this new job once I kind of understand the stuff. But that was probably my favorite part, is like when you run into a problem that like nobody's been able to fix yet, and you're just like, okay, I'm going to get this issue fixed, and it's going to feel great when I find out what the problem was. And I know sometimes it can get like incredibly frustrating when you're trying to fix something and everything you're doing is like, this isn't working, this isn't working, this isn't working. But when you get those problems done, that's like, yes, I finally did it. Even though you can't, like, half the time you can't tell anybody because they just won't understand what it is that you did. And
but
just,
and you come home and you tell your kids about
it. That's probably the thing that I enjoy the most. Is just making a problem work that just took forever, but you actually get it done.
Yeah. Well, that's you were the perfect person to ask to be the first one, because that's the perfect answer. And because it went so well, I'm going to continue to do it. So thank you. And thanks for coming on the podcast. It was fun talking about old times, and I'm sure this isn't the last time we'll talk to each other on a podcast. But good luck with yours, and I'll make sure to put all the information where they can find your podcast, at least Facebook page and stuff. I'll put it in the show notes so people can find it. And at the very least, my listeners can listen to my episode again. I mean, I put it on my feed, but you can listen to it again. And there's 5 more other episodes. So check out those episodes, especially if you love horror movies or love quizzes that get ruined. You can do that too. So
yeah, appreciate it. There's definitely, we run the gamut on horror movies. There's pretty much anything from the Train to Busan to a movie called Basket Case that was about a Siamese twin that was removed from his brother. Just we talk about it. And then one of the newer ones that I'm going to be posting is called Killer Sofa, which was unironically one of my favorite movies that I've watched on this podcast so far. Yes.
I'm gonna have to watch it now.
It's great. I highly recommend it.
That is another thing before I'm done. That is another thing I like about the beginning where you said where you tell people where they can find the movie. Because some of these movies, like I never heard of that one, but I know when I listen to the podcast, it'll say you can find this movie here, here, and here. I like that part too.
Yeah, I want to make sure people can watch the movies before the podcast. And a lot of times you can find it on free sites like Tubi and Peacock are the ones I use a lot.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Anthony. This was awesome. And I'm sure I'll be talking to you, man.
No, thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for checking out this episode of the Nerdball Podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're hearing this on any of the podcatchers. On YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We're coming at you 2 times a week now, audio and video. Check us out on all the social medias. Just search the Nerdball Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're out there. Gmail is the nerdballpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to shoot us an email, we'll be happy to get back to you. Thanks to Real JP Multimedia, Cuttlefish Graphics, Perrysburg Junior High STEM Lab, and Big Daddy Graphics for helping out the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.